That should be coming through there. So this is exciting. So a blue button has appeared, which I'm going to press now, which means that I am officially, in fact, not just me, myself and Robin Davis, who's in the green room currently waiting in the wings, are live for Rail Natter. Good evening, everyone. We have some of the usual favourites arriving in the chat already. We're back. We're back, everyone. We're back for Rail Natter after a hiatus of only a little 3 weeks. A 3-week break in 4 years doesn't feel too bad. For those who are looking forward to the 4-year anniversary episode, we'll do that soon. Don't worry. Perhaps perhaps we'll just delay that one back to episode 225 for some fun. Anyway, enough of this. I'm very excited about tonight's episode. It's an episode that's been long in the works, and it's going to be super interactive. So line up your questions. So, episode 208, everything you wanted to know about new trains with Robin Davis, with a rather snazzy looking rendered Aurora in the background, but more on that later. But first, we must talk about, actually, the first thing I need to do is get my pencil out and start scribbling on the screen, because this is how this works. First, we have to talk about the travel recovery stats. I always enjoy getting these up as much as I can for us to get an idea of what's going on. As ever, these are rolling averages, so they're lower than the absolute numbers. So we're actually, the absolute numbers are actually bouncing around up here for rail, but the rolling average is a little bit lower because of just the way that rolling averages work. And you can see we're kind of bouncing around in the 90% area. Robin, I don't know to what extent you follow these stats probably quite closely as someone who cares about railways. Rail, road, and bus services all kind of in parity at the moment, actually. They're quite closely aligned, which hasn't necessarily been the case in the past. So, quite interesting to see this little pattern starting to emerge of the three of bus and road and bus and private vehicle and rail kind of all coupled up together like that, which is quite interesting. But continuing to rise, there's still this sort of long sweeping, admittedly slowing climb of rail usage, which, given the chaos that the railways are in at the moment, is still pretty good going, I think. The only thing I don't know if you want to, if there's not much really to add to this at this point, Robin. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this. I suppose you might get a view of some of the other data that floats around as well. But I suppose what's the picture for the various long distance operators is a bit of a mixed bag, because Avanti's still not nearly where LNER are, whereas LNER are back at 130%, I think. TPE also pretty high, so. Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag for the long distance operators. I'm not quite sure where EMR are actually. I can't remember their current level of ridership, but it's not bad. I think they're better than Avanti. They're still getting more ridership than Avanti. I think Avanti are at the bottom of the list for the long distance operators. Anyway, this is all backed up by the ORR. It's nice that we've also got the ORR release, because I think this is the big absolute numbers situation. And we've got, we're up at 417 million journeys a quarter, which is getting close to the level we were at back in, we're not far off the level we were at in 2018-19. When, by the way, everything was really full. so this idea that we've got a railway that is now empty and we need to think about contraction rather than expansion is a bit silly to me. Anyway, we're not here to dwell upon this. We want to maximise the hour to discuss trains, because let's face it, everyone, that's what you're here for. You're all here for the trains. We're, of course, going to be talking about new trains. This is very exciting. We're going to have lots to chat about, I'm sure. For those in audio-only mode, on screen right now are a pair of train seats with a moquette cover and what may visually appear to be quite a squishy seat, but may not be. Looks can be deceiving. Anyway, I've kept Robin waiting in the wings far too long already. It only remains for me to say, everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the intercity 225 fades away, that's a train you and I are both fans of, Robin. We start with a picture of a pacer, which is not an unusual start for a rail natter, to be honest. But before we talk about this pacer and the young gentleman stood next to it, let's actually introduce Robin onto screen, because you've been hiding in the background for a while. Robin, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
I was busy enjoying the green room.
Oh, excellent. Green moon. Oh, lovely big green moon.
Can I have... I must update my rider, because no nuts, no
yeah,
twist.
no nuts.
and no blue and M&Ms.
I was going to say the M&Ms failed. Yeah, blue and purple M&Ms. Yeah, sorry about that. Actually, aubergine coloured M&Ms would have been the appropriate ride. Anyway, so Robin, it's so good to have you on at last.
This is completely neutral, by the way.
It is, yes.
We've had words about that.
We have, yes. I'll stop talking about the fact that you're currently on contract to a certain operator, but independent of that operator.
I can clearly see you're a fan of. So hello with Miles.
Miles enjoying. Miles has been in in quite a few episodes now. Actually, hello, Miles. Miles enjoying in the background. There's various bits of paraphernalia in the background around me. Anyway, I digress. Robin, first of all, before I waffle on and say how excited I am that we've finally managed to make this episode work, partly through my incompetence and partly through it being finding a good moment for you to have lots of fun stories to tell us. I'm so pleased you're on. Robin, introduce yourself. Tell everyone who's listening and watching who you are.
I'm Robin Davis, facilitator of new trains. Yeah. So I'm a career railwayman. Joined the railway a long time ago. It was interesting. That interesting video. I was like a bit worried to see how many of them we're going to talk about. I think of the very first one. That's a bit harsh if you're going to make some rude thing about. Is this one of yours? But the APT, my dad travelled on one of the few rare passenger services of the APT before it froze. Aqua brakes, not necessarily the best thing.
No, that wasn't a good idea.
But definitely 225. The 225 is where my railway career started. So started with a new train fleet and a route upgrade, and that's where currently I am with my mystery employer. So who is introducing a new train fleet and a route upgrade involving electrification. So we're going to talk about new trains, and so I'm currently on my, what did we say, eighth and a half?
8.5, yeah, 8.5.
8.5, yeah, and there's a bonus prize if anybody can say why it's 0.5.
Yes.
So started in British Rail, so I always say this thing because lots of people talk about we must go back to British Rail and all that carry on. So my challenge is always that you're only allowed to have an opinion on how good or bad, or particularly how good you think BR was, if you actually experienced it as a user. And I don't mean as a 13-year-old boy on the front page of the local paper. Again, there's a prize if anybody can guess where that was, so you can flick back to that.
Oh yeah,
so that was on the front page of the local paper, and that local paper came out once a week. So there you go. That's my, as we lovingly refer to as a railway thing. As a child, that was my home station. So well, that's sort of.
Where is the home station? See who can guess who the home station is. It's a nice. The 140 was an interesting vehicle. It spent a lot of time in Scotland, actually, despite Pacers never then actually following it up there. We went through the 140 back in our Pacer episode to explain what it is. But an interesting vehicle. We don't have to dwell on the 140. I was just going to say, before, I'm going to go back to Big Faces briefly, because I do have a hat here that you might enjoy. If I just put that on there.
Oh, right. Okay, cool.
So anyway, right, just to hark back, we have all sorts of, I've also got this key ring here, so and I'm actually surrounded by paraphernalia associated with
one of mine.
I was going to say one of yours. Yeah. So all that stuff lying around.
Joined as a BR, went to uni, unusually joined the railway with a transport degree rather than Byzantine studies or or something geography. Should have been a teacher. And then had a year out with the railway. Loved it so much. Came back. I didn't. So back to the bit about BR. So you got to be at least. I got 21 upwards. So as a paying user, rather than on your mum and dad's family rail card.
I'm not sure about these rules, Robin. I'm not sure.
Depending on where you see privatisation. So I'm going to go privatisation as 1995. So therefore, we're now coming up for, do the maths, 30. So you've got to be in your 50s, basically. Right. So you have no right to have any view of whether BR is any good or not, because you did not experience it. So, yeah.
I'll let the data do the talking on that one. So,
okay. So go back to.
Let's have a look. Of course. I mean, this is a good example of where BR did not succeed, frankly. So it's not a bad not a bad introduction to the nuanced picture of the past.
I would dispute that because the two examples of that. So the the sort of 1950s, 1960s DMU stock desperately needed replacing. It was falling to bits. And the government was quite keen on taking a trim to the railway, not a big fan of it.
Oh,
and also those big heavy trains were taking lumps out of ever decreasing maintained rural lines. So actually what became the Sprinter thing was possibly a saviour. I always say the things were done to a price. People talk about done on the cheap, and I think electrification of the East Coast Main Line is probably one of those. And having spent 20 years with it and trying to ultimately my last proper job was actually trying to operate it. That actually, if people hadn't come up with clever engineers, and this is where clever engineers are a good thing, Gareth. So you do get a bonus price. Well, whether you fit into that category, but your ilk, as it were, or your brethren, actually somebody coming up with piling rather than concreting and being able to, can we space the mass a little bit? If you've got nearly 400 miles of railway, if you can move your mass a bit further out, that's a lot of money you save. So done to a price.
It was, yeah, and it's interesting. So the Pacers certainly were a dead end, but the Pacer. I'd recommend everyone goes and watches the Pacer episode for that, because we learn about why the Pacers appeared. It's a good episode.
Then ended up, if we skip to the next one.
Oh yeah, go on. Yep. Actually, we've got no guesses for this station yet. Actually, come on, chat. You're better than this. I
can give a clue. If we don't get anything in 5 minutes, I'll come back with a clue.
Yeah. Okay. Wait a minute. We've got Crewe as a suggestion, and someone else has suggested Kilmarnock, which is an interesting one. Okay. No to both of those. Anyway, right. Yeah. We digress. So on screen now.
So on the left again, there's a prize to be had. So guess the location. So that's me as a grad. That's me as on my year out.
In some sneakers, which is quite good. I'm just going to point out these sneakers here.
Yeah, and so I was with the safety footwear has moved on from high tech. I didn't have good enough to have Adidas or Nike, but the high tech trainer was a very good piece of safety footwear. And that isn't a donkey jacket before anybody says it. And
is that a BR safety? Have you distracted me with all the nostalgia, Robin? Is that a BR safety triangle? They have their crikey. There we go.
So
crikey. Anyway.
So these days I should have at that point been wearing a blue hat rather than a white hat. So I wear my white hat with pride now. But yeah. So when I was responsible for the train plan for that, I think it was an Easter bank holiday, Easter weekend, when we were diverting to allow engineering work, which involved electrification. So
yeah. So this is. It looks like a bridge. It looks like some bridge work is going on there, because it looks like they've dug up.
There is a rather big bridge. We wouldn't really call it a bridge these days. Next to the station, quite famous one. Not that far. Still, it's in England.
Yeah, where?
Go back to my railway started with electrifying and a new train fleet, which was in the montage.
Oh yes, it was. So you're electrifying. Oh golly, where will this be then? So if you're in the montage, so that means that you're electrifying providing electrification for the introduction of the 225, which means, are we in the kind of, where is this
station with a very, very big? Let's give you an easy clue. Viaduct next to it.
Is this Durham?
It is indeed.
Oh, so there you go.
So they took the opportunity to waterproof and redo the track. Yeah.
So this is fun, because trains, when they don't stop at Durham, hammer through here, and they're at a desperately funny angle because of the curve. And the viaduct is quite an interesting one to watch trains go over when they're going at a fair old lick, because everything looks quite cosy. Anyway, for the audio-only listeners,
that one
Durham in the background.
That was a bit more appropriate for PPE these days.
Yes.
In a mystery depot in the Midlands.
We'll never know where it is. Absolutely not identifiable by this structure here for anyone who walks from the station south.
But electrification will come near it, but not to it. No, that's tell a lie. It has got 170 metres of electrification hopefully we'll turn the juice on to that very shortly.
Okay. So a career spanning quite a few 8.5 train introduction. We need to stop giving people mystery challenges where people are saturating them with challenges of working out where people. Someone's saying Bletchley. Someone else is suggesting Berwick. There's a lot of considerations of home stations. All incorrect. So
it's in the north of England.
It's in the north.
Then,
we must talk about this thing.
This is my second one, but probably one of my favourites. And one of the things I'm very proud of is I tend to start a project and finish it. So I was the project manager for GNR's White Rose. And so ultimately we have 3 blue sets to in response to competition. So competition came to the East Coast when Hull Trains. It was Hull Trains and Wagon were looking to run additional services.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the big steps of a 365 prevented the 365 coming north of Peterborough.
Yeah.
But considering they were built in York, that was an interesting thing. So they were hauled without their footsteps to go south.
This railway.
But then Hull Trains got their 170s from Anglia start, and so therefore, in response to the competition, we needed a 125-mile-an-hour rolling stock that was just sitting on the shelf. So Voyager hadn't quite cascaded enough HSTs out across country because that came later.
Yeah.
So I could tell a few stories about this one. So including my evening with the Belgian Trademark Committee. Here's the new trains, the most extensively tested kettle in the world. So if anybody had travelled on Eurostar, of course it didn't have it had hot water heaters. Coffee didn't have, but we served free tea and coffee at GNR, so we wanted to make a proper British cup of tea. So we fitted, we got Calamax boilers from Leeds. The sort of thing, if you go into a cafe, you'll see a Calamax. You'll see them on lots of trains now. And interesting, my boss, who was an ex-phenomenal engineer, production director, I went, don't you need to sort of test these sort of things like electrical testing and vibrate? No. It's only a kettle, shove it on the train. We went through the first neutral section coming out of King's Cross. Bang, that was the end of Calamax number 1. So £3,000 to some consultants, XBR consultancy in Derby to design some gizmo. That's the extent. You'll find that's boxes of tricks, gizmos, thingies. That's my engineering speak. Some widget, some stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Went through the neutral section. Fantastic. Went to Leeds back twice before we managed to shake it to bits and it fell apart.
Oh, no.
Nothing to do with the ride quality of East Coast, and these are lovely rides because they're articulated bogies. And then the next thing, so it was like send it off to another £3,000 to the consultancy in the Derbyshire area, and a rubber pad, and we've got our lovely boilers. But my favourite thing is this: my claim to fame is I hold the speed record for a domestic UK train service. So it's not Javelin on Southeastern, and Steve White, who was the production director of Eurostar and who's now the MD at Southeastern, good friend of mine. Because as you see, do you recognise? It's a bit obvious where that one is.
This is cheating because it says that it's in Calais on the sign
Calais
here.
Yeah, so that's on the LGV.
But this, by the fact that this is an old picture, but it has what should be now a familiar line-side ETCS type control panel. People should recognise this is not in the UK.
So 330 kilometres an hour between Calais, Fréthun, and Hondegem loop in between near Lille, because we had to do some testing associated with EMC, and we had to demonstrate compatibility, one of my specialist subjects, because the white sets sometimes got used on the Disney services, sadly not running, and we had to demonstrate that the mods we were doing to the train to work with UK infrastructure
would not compromise that.
Compatible with the French infrastructure. Le solution, we took the blue set. I wouldn't possibly say that it was a very deliberate ploy by my British colleagues in Eurostar, and we ran it, and we had to do a 10% overspeed test. Hence the reason why we run at 330 kilometres an hour with a GNR set. So
that is very fast. That's the fastest any. That is literally the fastest any domestic UK train has travelled, which is rather snazzy. Other questions: were these essentially limited to 110 when they were running north of London?
So to start with, the EMC one was issued. That was the first thing.
Yep.
Again, there's another story if we have time for that. We'll come back to that one.
Yeah.
And then again, pantograph testing. Big three in compatibility: gauging, EMC, and with electric train pantograph compatibility. Particularly with that, so we went out and did our compatibility testing. Unfortunately, some bright spark in the engineering side decided, we'll keep the monitoring. We had a defined bit we were testing between, because wind speed is a very important thing when you're doing pantograph testing. If it's too gusty or whatever, it will screw your results. And they decided to leave it on all the way back to North Pole. Unfortunately, it was quite a gusty night, and we had a spike in there, and somebody went, hang on, you've got an exceedance there. And therefore, one of the challenges was, particularly with the favourably pan on this one, that the wire gradient, so if you've got the wire gradient climbs quite steeply, the risk is that you don't have enough force, so your pantograph
to maintain contact.
If it's coming there's too much force being done. So East Coast built to a price. So the last thing you want to do is have a level crossing, really high wire height, and a bridge, very low wire height, close together. Botany Bay, is it Botany Bay? Yes, it's one north of Newark, infamous for dewirements. Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
So as a result, and again, the operation side of things is we had a number of locations where the data was going, not sure, but how does a driver know that? So we kept it really simple, and we ran restricted between Grantham and Doncaster, really identifiable locations, even though there were pockets.
Even though most of it's fine, it's just a very obvious here and here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so up to Grantham 125, north of Doncaster 125. And so everything in between.
I see. Okay.
And the other myth about it was that it took too much juice. No, there was a restriction already on the number of electric that there are today.
Yeah, I was going to say we're back in that problem again with PSU2. Not even the new project keeping pace.
It wasn't this train; it was just an overall thing. The train is limited to 300 amps, like any other. So
yeah. By the way, for everyone listening, we've said EMC several times. This is electromagnetic compatibility, or buzziness between multiple different electronic systems, and there are lots of things that you don't want to interfere with buzziness. Nowadays, it's people's phones, but back when this train was running, it was mostly the signalling system. You didn't want to screw up. So among other, and all the systems on the train as well. So lots of different electrical systems all buzz their own little frequencies, and ensuring that those don't make a mess of each other is what we call EMC. I don't know, that's my summary, Robin. I think that's a fair one.
Yes, one of the pictures actually I forgot to send you. So unfortunately in my railway career, one of the difficult thing is two train accidents, one at Hatfield, one at Heck. So awful day. I was actually there. But we were doing some, because the train was going to be going towards, trying to think, so Heck was May 21. We were planning to go to Leeds, and we were doing some further EMC testing. So actually that set 3303 and 3 was sat in at Doncaster with all its EMC monitoring equipment. So when that awful accident happened, the overhead line tripped out. This picked the ICMU system picked that up at Doncaster.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
So that was pretty, but that's one that learns actually 2 terrible train accidents, big failures of overhead line on it. So when I was at GNR, we were the first item on the BBC National News. It was 35 degrees, a dewirement in the Huntington area, six trains stranded. We had the air ambulance. We were detraining. So the whole issue about and standards, so if you emergency equipment of standards, it's got less and less prescriptive, but you still have to look at risk assessment and things like that. So again, one of the features around new trains is evacuation. So people see the very traditional, if you see a very traditional wooden ladder,
yes,
if you've got, so if you take a 9-car Azuma, for instance, that's got 630 seats.
More than this train, actually. Even though it's shorter, it's more than this train, actually, the Azuma. Yeah.
630 seats. if you had to evacuate everybody down a ladder, and if you average 30 seconds per person, recognise some people will go down there very quick, some people will take a lot longer, very nervous. One evacuation point, 30 seconds, that's 315 minutes. That's, do my maths, that's over 5 hours.
Yes.
If you have one evacuation point, we'll kind of come on to it at TPE, we had a fire incident with an engine fire on 185. You see the forward-facing camera, it's the rear-facing. Driver brings the train to a stand, set off the fire suppression. About 20 to 30 seconds after it, because there was smoke billowing out.
Yeah.
You see pictures of people wandering up the track with their suitcase, their bags. They've phoned the Uber, and they're going to the nearest point because I'm going. So
we'll get to that, everyone. Predicting the public. It's not that we blame the public, but it's just we have to predict the behaviour of the public, and that can be challenging. So. Leaving these wonderful in audio only mode, by the way, we've been looking at a GNER liveried Class 373, or the original Channel Tunnel Eurostar trains. For those who are not familiar, like that's the unit based on a TGV, but squished through a sausage machine to fit on our loading gauge, and in this case, painted in a rather fetching, I think, adaptation of the GNER livery. I think they could. Oh yeah, in fact, wait a minute, just a second, I'll go big face. This thing there is, of which Robin has a Hornby version. Cheeky.
That's my train.
yeah, too right. There it is, absolutely. Have you collected all of the Hornby versions of your trains, by the way?
No. So I'm still trying to get a 68. So right. I hear there's plenty on the market. So, but,
yeah, quite. So we press on because we're in King's Cross here, but there's some stuff going on. Making a film in the, I mean, good grief, these films were a very long time ago now, but tell us what's going on here as this particular film is being shot in King's Cross. This is the first one, if I remember, actually.
Before Marvel, I think Harry Potter was the biggest movie franchise. I think that's what they call them.
Indeed.
Phenomenally successful, and despite perhaps Miriam Argloy still telling people that they shouldn't be interested in Harry Potter, go to King's Cross and look at the. I know there
are a lot of tourists stood next to it.
It's a quiz question.
Yeah,
but that is platform 9 3/4. Platform 9 3/4 is not that made-up thing on the Western Concourse.
Correct. No.
But platform 4 and 5. So, I've done 3 Harry Potter movies. If people who know Harry Potter, Harry goes to Hogwarts from King's Cross and platform 9 3/4. So Warner's wanted to shoot there, and between the accident after Hatfield, where we lost the set, we then did so this is now 23 years ago. Yeah. We filmed the very first one, so there's my signed picture of Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson, looking quite a bit younger then. And then I was very fortunate to get invited to 2 cast and crew showings. And by the time I did number 5, I actually got invited to the premiere, and by that stage it got so big, they actually had 2 Odeons in Leicester Square for that. But my best claim to fame, I'm in the first film.
Oh, you're in it, are you? Oh, golly, okay.
I am in it. And the other thing was that I became aware of what was product placement. So if you ever see films, and I think one of Pierce Brosnan's, I think it's the Bond film, is the thing which is most product placement, where he's driving the BMW from his Sony phone, and he crashes into the Avis rental. It is all over. So to put it into context, our commercial team wanted to charge Warner, but understandable for the rent of the trains.
Yeah.
And we had 4 minutes product placement in that. And there's even a scene where Harry asks where 9 3/4, and there's an actor dressed as GNR with the GNR.
I was going to say, you got the GNR logo in the film, so you can't.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And to put it into context, at that point in time, Warner Brothers so Coca-Cola paid Warner Brothers in 2001 prices $125 million to put the Harry Potter logo on the Coca-Cola bottle.
Oh my God.
They did in the autumn of that. I think it was the autumn of that year or the year after, when it was the DVD launch of the film. Even that is very even dates. And they did a big event at King's Cross, and they had the Hogwarts Express and all that carry on. They spent more money than that than GNR's entire year's marketing budget.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, the thing is, like, so yeah, what's a 4-minute long television advert, which would have, you know, potentially a smaller audience globally. That television advert would cost millions and millions and millions to just put on telly, let alone actually produce. So yeah, that's some decent advertising there. So fair play. So
I do have a little bit of commercial acumen.
Indeed, yeah. Well, quite. These books, as we know, did not. These films, rather, they just create their original films. There's no books involved that created them, so we won't talk about those. But the films remain. I mean, certainly there are a lot of people in King's Cross still going to the Harry Potter shop, and also annoyingly, people all travel to see the Glenfinnan Viaduct, and they all call it the Harry Potter Bridge. So yeah, dear me. Anyway, right. So enough of that. We look at one of my favourite pictures, actually, of railway projects and of rolling stock projects is this one in the top corner. So we've moved into the snazzy blue and purple and silver era. Robin,
yeah. So we've
tell us about this.
Skipped two because we didn't put it in, but
yeah,
they build on. So towards the end, I went from GNR into National Express East Coast. I think I've done 5 of the 57 varieties of East Coast, and the birth of the Intercity Express program, the replacement of the HST, seems to be in a bit of I was very disappointed that when I went to my mystery current employer, that actually I hadn't brought the new train in to get rid of the HST. Something else got rid of it. But every other company, Great Western, East Coast, managed to get rid of the HST. So boo at me for that with shiny new. So worked on that. The project paused. I left East Coast and I went to Great Western. Again, a new train fleet, new infrastructure, electrification, GWEP. So I worked at Great Western for 6 years and left just as the new train was coming in. And then I came to Trans-Pennine Express, where I was head of new trains. And the thing I like about this, I always talk about contracts don't make trains. Designers, engineer, so the contracts particularly is people. My phrase is people make the magic happen. And I am so proud of my team and my colleagues. So we introduced 3.5 new trains, or 3.5 types of new trains.
Yeah.
So 2 from CAF and 1 from Hitachi, bi-mode. We had 8 or 9 new or rebuilt depots to facilitate that, and that's a key thing with new trains. Everybody forgets the depots.
Yeah.
And one about that was I'll call it a regional operator in the UK. They were getting new trains. Their existing trains were all units of 2, so 2 cars, 4 cars, that sort of thing. The new train come out and people say, oh, it's only become a 3 car. Well, actually, they became odd numbers, but that 3 cars a 50% increase in stabling capacity.
Yeah.
And somebody went, oh, well, even if you go, a new train has less time to visit a depot, less reason to visit, becomes more
more availability, but
more
less,
availability.
Yeah.
Still need to park them somewhere overnight.
Yeah.
So and then actually, that became an issue, and particularly during the transition phase, where you've got your old ones still there and your new ones coming in. Your new ones tend to be bigger. Where do I put everything? So that's it's not just about the shiny new train. It's if you don't have the logistics and the infrastructure to support looking after it, no surprise when your availability falls off a cliff. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you might have views you do or don't want to share. I'm in 2 minds. It's a shame that one of the. I mean, obviously, there were reasons that the preference for an organisation like TP would not have been to have 3 or 3.5 new fleets. That was never so that was never what the setup. But it was the nature of the market that in order to hit the dates, you had to diversify the fleet.
The
right?
exam question. So I've never been involved in bidding. I've always been taking something that somebody else's concept, and delivering it.
Yeah.
Developing it and delivering it. So the exam question was newish, new trains, couldn't be a DMU, and they needed to be there as soon as possible. So that was the coach's solution. And I believe the other bidders was Wessex Electrics being push-pull hauled by 67s. That was going to be there.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Because what would have been a better solution for this would have been a single homogeneous fleet. If you took the example of the Hitachi, it doesn't have to be a Hitachi, but using that
could have been
example,
what just have all Hitachis. They would have done what they needed.
The fleet would be a BIMOs for what are 802s and coaches, and the 801 electric version for the 397 existing product and whatever. A factor in that, and again, new trains, is that another one of Hitachi's projects was running late.
Yeah,
and they just didn't have the manufacturing capacity to deliver to those timescales.
Something about curved windscreens, if I do recall. And I'm an operator. For me, my proper operating days, the last thing we wanted was, so if you go back to 225 was a you think it was a single fleet, but actually it had Pullman sets and non-Pullman sets. Oh, golly, of course.
So it had extra first class, extra thing. And therefore the Pullmans had to be on specific services because they were aimed at targeted. So that was a headache for the control. Much, much better. And it'll be interesting now with LNER. So LNER, they do have a hybrid fleet of Zuma and the 225, but their new fleet they bought is from CAF.
Yep.
So again, but one of the key things we tried to do at TPE, I joined 6 months into the project, so we talked about not making things the same, but aligning it. You might not have everything identical if you've gone down different lines, but one really simple thing was about labels. You think that would be
so basically what you want is passengers to not notice they're on a different train. That's kind of a key thing, right?
And just something as simple as that. If you look at the TPE fleet, one of the things we got wrong was just even the identification of first class. So first class on the 185, 397, coaches, 802 is all different. And that's somehow something stupid, and it caused a lot of. So if you take on the 802, it's not really well marked from a first class point of view. Customers get in genuinely. Some are pushing it, but some are sitting there. The next thing they come and then there's a conflict point with the member of staff who says, checks your ticket as soon as they go, and depending on how that individual handles that, suddenly there's conflict. So even something as simple as a label can cause a huge amount of grief for the customer and the colleague. So So the involvement of the user is phenomenally important, and we're going to come on to it. So one of the things I roles is I represent customer and colleague. And it's so important to have somebody who's a representative. You can't ask everybody because equally we'd all have different views. I'm sure that the choice of carpets. The other thing is I've never got into interiors. I call it carpets and curtains. So if you want it this color, that color, whether you want flat cloth, maquette, leather, whatever, my preference in what my sofa's covered in will be different to the next person, to the different person. So that's really important. But as I go back to, great bunch of people, and I'm very fortunate that the mystery employer I am at the moment, I work with a fantastic group of individuals, all very dedicated, all got the customer and the colleague at the centre of what we're trying to do. So that's so important.
Yeah, and I think the last thing on this fleet was, okay, it was a messy fleet from a lack of strategic planning, way above even TPE level decision making, really. But the engineering and the collaboration and the sort of the efforts that went into the staff, your team's efforts that went into delivering a very complicated fleet, frankly, in a very short space of time is pretty impressive. And there were certainly there were some delays, but actually, relatively speaking, there have been, if we look at some of the other train introductions, the delays on this fleet were not that significant compared to some of the other delays. So, and they did represent, admittedly, thanks to constrained demand, they were immediately full because they were not only more seats, but also they were really nice. So people really jumped onto them.
But I think this is another example. If I take the 397 is a 5-car, 802 is a 5-car, and people are critical of saying, and I'd say at my current one, where we're getting a 5-car, and it's replacing a 5-car, and it's combining multiple, and people are going, why haven't you got a 6? Why haven't you got a 7? Actually not understanding the operational constraints. So one of the things that a really simple thing, so 397 operated Liverpool Lime Street to Glasgow, Manchester Airport to Edinburgh. Manchester Airport, you can only put eight vehicles into it. So that's a core operation. Actually, Lime Street itself doesn't really have a great deal of long platforms, and they're generally occupied by Pendolino. So actually, there are certain key infrastructure constraints of the, even if people say, well, you can have SDO. Well, if your terminus station...
that's all very well, but if the train's sat over the station throat, then you kind of, SDO doesn't help. This a point that you often make and that I often make. The railway's a system. You cannot think of these things in isolation. And actually, the decisions to extend trains have to be accompanied by some pretty long-term thinking, which obviously we don't necessarily have a huge amount of.
Also, and again, going back to, we saw the seat, how comfy is that seat? just because something looks like on the outside, there's a bit of a TARDIS effect. So 802, saying that's a 5-car, that's a 5-car. There's 50 seats difference with the 802 on the right-hand side. The trains that my mystery employer is putting in, we're replacing 5-cars, but each train is 24% more seats. So it's not 5. We're more like a 6.5-car, 5-car, 6, and we're getting 6 more trains than we've got at the moment.
Yeah. So we've had our first question that I think is quite an interesting one. That is we have different technologies to dot matrix. It's a genuinely curious question. Is there a particular standard that pushes towards dot matrix, or there are other technologies? Is it just that dot matrix is the only way to get that brightness? Or is it a preference?
So if you look at,
for example, the Glasgow Central sort of indicator destination board there.
That was the technology that was available at the time. But if you look at how really simple, if you look at screens on stations have evolved over time, where again, the station you're familiar with, York, you see the classic yellow dot matrix on the main thing. Go to Doncaster on LNER. Not only is that a telescreen, a TFT, whatever you call it, you can use color, just exactly like any, this thing, telly, whatever. But now they're showing a person communicating in sign language. So actually, and one of the beauties about that is that you can display different messages in color. So interesting, even with a dot matrix. So I've been very fortunate to go to Japan a number of times, and there, they'll show certain text is in green, certain text is in yellow, certain is in white, and some of it is, this is just for information, Buffy's open, don't have a Buffy on a Shinkansen, or here is a safety information. And also great, and I think the Underground is a great one of this, about the use of a male versus a female voice. So the Underground, for example, I think they use a male voice on one platform and a female voice on another platform at certain things. And also, I think GWR did it, but certainly a UK operator where they use one voice to convey, I'll call it regular, welcome aboard this train to such and such calling at. But if you want to get a really important message across, a safety one, or the doors in this carriage won't open, you need to move forward, so you need to pay attention. It's a different voice.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. I don't know if ergonomics captures quite that, but it's certain that but thinking behaviourally about the passenger, again, we'll get to that in a moment, is really important.
The current project I'm working on, we have I'm really hopeful that we've got. So, for instance, one of the things that we've introduced is the classic, again, going back to toilets. I will talk about toilets. The pinnacle of my career has been, this is what I joined the railway for, was having to calculate or assess the size of the waste tank was adequate. We'll come back to that one. That's one.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a geographical difference.
And then we'll do toilets. So this one. So we will display in every saloon so two things. One is building on something. If you go on 700 on Thameslink, occupancy. So it basically is your pictogram of the train, and it gives you an indication this vehicle is busy. So if you're in that vehicle and you see, because the classic is to ask the guard and go, "Are there any seats up there, mate?" And you go, "Well, through the power of the mind, how can I see that?" So to help that, and ultimately to because a lot of it is trying to get some self-management, and this isn't about DOL or getting rid of staff on board, because I generally believe is the important service as an intercity operator, but there to display in every vehicle the occupancy, and we're using a colour light system. So we're doing both colour, red being busy, yellow so busy, green being dust, and the pictograms of 1 seat, 2 seats, 3 seats.
Yeah, for monochromatic folk. Yeah.
And then I think it might be. I'm going to be brave and say I think it's a first, but there may be others out there that we show the occupancy of all the toilets to the train.
Oh, interesting.
So the classic would be on an intercity. If there is a toilet in your vehicle, there's a little indicator at the end of the saloon with the WC and the cross through it. But if the toilet's in the next vehicle, they might not have wired that in. Might be, might not be. But if it's if it's 3 vehicles away, it's not showing it. So it'll show you throughout there. And one of the icon debates was about the use of icons, and things like, we're very familiar now, and again, taking the mobile phone, your power off symbol is a recognizable symbol. Something that doesn't work, a straight diagonal line. What does a Wi-Fi symbol? That's a very symbols are very and this is just not, even if English isn't your first language, but it's just the use of icons, pictograms. So what we're doing now is, again, if the toilet is, I can't remember at night, I think it will show you it go to red or something like that. But if the toilet unfortunately is locked out of use, and we have a toilet which will lock all our toilets now, it's not just the power operated doors, will lock themselves out of use if it's too full, it disappears.
Okay, it just disappears. So
disappears. So rather than communicate our failures to the customer because the toilet is broken, because as far as the customer is concerned, if you can't get in it, it's not there.
So I'm conscious of time because I'm loving this discussion. I'm going to push us on, but very, very quickly, Robin, how do those sensors work? Because we've got 2 or 3 people asking. I would love to know how those sensors actually work. The busyness sensors so the occupancy sensors of how busy coaches are.
So I'm aware of 2 technologies that's used in the UK. I think there's a third, but I'm not familiar with the technology, the weighing one. But one is basically as you join, so at the doors and between vehicles, you can use either infrared or high. I'm going to call it video technology.
Oh yeah, like the deep learning to go. That's a person. That's a person. That's a person, and you basically count people in and out of the vehicle.
Yeah, you count them out, and once the train leaves the station, generally I think we allow a 5-minute settling down period, so people might move between vehicles. But generally after that, certainly on an intercity service where you're not stopping every 3 minutes, but it's using effectively a motion sensor.
Yeah, nice. Well, there you go. Fantastic. Very interesting.
The other benefit of that is also to beam that data to lie to the control. So if you have to make some operational decisions, I've got to cancel this, I've got to stop there, actually gives the control team live data to go, well, actually, if we stop that one, which is already rammed to the gunnels, so it might be disappointing when you see the first train go through your station. Well, actually, you were never going to get on it because it would have been the equivalent of the Tokyo in the rush hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So right, I'm conscious that you have some breakdowns into detail. So the first one is there are 3 numbers I can see on this screen here, which is 1 and a 2 and a 5. But tell us about this. We're inside the Calva train. Robin, tell us what's going on here.
So this is 397. So there's some great work done by colleagues at Avanti. and actually bringing, with their new Hitachi fleet, the ability to operate up to 125 miles an hour on the West Coast Main Line with a non-tilting train. Got there before you, boys.
Yeah.
So this is three, and actually we did it with 802, and we did it with a 10-car 802 in electric mode as well. So we did both 397 and 802 at 125 miles an hour on the West Coast Main Line, and not just 1 mile section. So
no, I wrote it because we had a conversation and I wrote a piece about it in Rail Magazine, and then for various reasons, a lot of the physical work needed to deliver the overall speed increase hasn't actually happened. But from a train operator side,
this was with the infrastructure that was there, no changes to it whatsoever.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But there was definitely an additional step of we can adjust.
Basically, what clever engineers did was that basically we wanted, right, let's look at the camp profile of the existing infrastructure, and what we found was quite a decent chunk. So this was from Crewe through to over the Scottish border, and we found some decent sections where you could run. And the thing that constrained us was it would have meant changes literally to the speed boards.
Yes, yeah.
And part of the history with the West Coast, of course, its previous stock of 87s and 90s, they were only 110, and they were 110 because of a manning agreement. Because BR, had, if you went over 100 miles an hour, you needed to double man. They managed to negotiate with ASLEF to get that to 110. That's why things like the 87 moved from 100 to 110, but the 90 was only as 110. Whereas in East Coast, there was double manning, and then early days of privatisation through a restructuring initiative got rid of, pays your money, do that. So there was no incentive
to actually provide the improvement. Yeah,
and then you did generally need to run. You did need tilt because of cant, but there were still large sections. I'm pleased to see that with some work that's going on, that actually that will become a reality now on West Coast. But not definitely. The first.
Yeah, for the new Avanti fleet, or the new West Coast fleet that'll be running. Absolutely. So that's the tale of the. If you want to read more about that, then Robin and I had a chat, and it's in a rail piece.
Of all the trains I've operated, I have been very fortunate to have driven that.
Oh, what, really? Ooh.
Yeah, and I've driven coaches. So I did a cab ride with recently, and my colleague drivers, we were talking about stuff, and he said, "You ever thought of being a driver?" And I went, "No, that would be a terrible idea," because of course you need focus, and I tend to. I need shiny things. So I'm not very good at concentrating for long periods of time. But I have been very lucky to drive 397 and coaches on the test track in the Czech Republic.
Oh, that is very cool.
Sadly, not my 802 though. So.
Yeah, that is very cool. So, and this is where we get into really some really interesting tales of things to think about. So. I think I know what you're going to talk about here, but we have on screen. I shall audio describe what we have. We have two pictures. One picture is of it's a bit of a grainy zoom in, but you can see two very bright blue lights, and then a slightly faded, possibly in the dinginess, what appears to be a yellow button, which by the way is an important button, a very important button. In the next image, it's the same button, but it doesn't have any bright lights around it. It's got a really nice bright white, what I presume is also a luminescent sort of glow-in-the-darky type paint situation, and it's much easier to see. So a hint as to what we might be about to talk about, Robin. So tell us about this.
So go back to this thing about representing. I'm very proud of. It's really important to involve the user, and I'm going to talk about this from a staff perspective, and particularly union representatives. Bit of boring detail. It's called the 1977 Safety Committee and Safety Representatives Regulations. It is the law to involve staff reps. Yep. It's the law. So change to a system must involve it. So I'm very keen and very proud of that. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that I was invited by ASLEF last year, and recognising the industrial relations challenges that the industry has faced in the last few years. I was the only management representative to talk at a House of Parliament reception. It was an ASLEF one on working well with ASLEFers, but they aren't trade union colleagues and representatives. That's the way you do business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so we did for IUP, we did a very high fidelity mock-up. We did things like a dark desk study, and we did a glare study. So basically, little annoying blue lights people will see, particularly to move those to what we call halo style. If a light's got to be staying on, setting some principles. And then this one is, so the AWS on the right-hand side is from the Hitachi cab. That little sort of what looks like a faded whitey circle, that is photoluminescent.
Yeah.
So there were certain key features that, yes, you build up muscle memory in a cab, but here, something like that. And we've rolled that out from some service experience with our new fleet to about 5 features. So, for instance, the pan down button has one of those around it. So if you see something in the headlights and you go, need to get the pan down, helps you locate it. So just little attention to detail can make such a big.
But it's really key stuff. Drivers have, trained drivers are incredible. They have an incredible knowledge of the route that they have to have. A lot of people don't realize the amount of knowledge they have to have, but they also have to deal with when it's a lot of not doing a huge amount, pointed by moments of extreme high stress and the need to be absolutely calm and controlled, and therefore have a cab that gives the answers you need very, very quickly, right? You want that cab to be absolutely something that's very natural, to know where things are. Things are very visible. If something has discombobulated you, for example, say you've walloped a tree, so you've got all the dust and mess, but you still have to operate the cab because your train is still on the tracks and doing something. You want everything to be really visible. And this is a really good example of that. And it goes for everything in the cab. It's not just this, by the way, for anyone who doesn't, this is the AWS Acknowledge. This is when you go over an AWS magnet, an automatic warning system magnet. Fantastic technology from the 50s, and actually before. You get it's a, and you push the button to go, yes, fine, I know that signal was yellow, I am paying attention, thanks. I can't remember which way around, whether it's the bell or the buzz when you have to acknowledge, but
so the horn is the warning one, and the bell, which you have to acknowledge. If you don't do it in 2.7 seconds, the brakes will come on.
That's the one. So it's a very useful safety system, and therefore a very necessary button to know where it is so you can press it. But
even something like that, if you got the 2.7 seconds, if you had what I'd call analog in the move from HST to IEP, you went from from relay solid state. That 2.7 seconds, because there was a little delay in the mechanics of the AWS receiver, drivers were getting caught out.
Because suddenly it shortens. They had 2.7 seconds plus an additional 0.4 seconds or something like that. Just enough.
Now with solid state,
it's instant.
It's instantaneous. And then the other thing is that's a plastic button, ye olde metal thing which you hit like that. Again, people, a few of those, not just on this fleet, but in others, early days of breakage, and then drivers found actually needed a little bit more sensitive touch, shall we say. So if we move on to the next.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. This is a good one. So we were talking about the behaviour of the public, and this isn't us calling out the behaviour of the public, it's just saying we have to design a system that works for the public, and therefore you have to attempt to second guess 99% of people's behaviour, right? And that can be challenging. And this is quite a good example of that. Oh,
so
yes.
So this is this is Sheffield Station, and I was at Sheffield Station, and just as I was going down onto that platform where those customers are going, there was a gentleman, and I'm going to say husband and wife, and she was in the wheelchair. And she started to get out of it, and I was thinking, I think I must be right behind them. And I went, I can't believe there's no lift. And then I did that instinctively, and I went, there's the lift.
Yeah.
Because by this time, they were off. They were halfway down.
Yeah. So you couldn't help.
The lift. It's not recognise I'm on autopilot. Somebody in a wheelchair, one of the things is you would be looking for a lift for accessible. And then, no, I don't think it was a miracle cure that she got out and walked. People use, they might not be able to walk very far. It doesn't mean that. And that's another factor. It's not just so on IEP, when we assess the wheelchair accessible toilet, it's not just about somebody who is restricted to a wheelchair. They may use a wheelchair to help them. The other thing is also my favourite subject is around ramps. is that it's not just you don't need just to consider where the ramp at the wheelchair space. You need to consider that at every door. It's a standards requirement that trains must have 10% of in a vehicle being priority seats, so they're slightly wider, easier to get into. So actually you need to, because not only people might use a wheelchair to get into the vestibule and walk those last few steps to their seat, but also people, steps are a challenge. So actually walking up a ramp is incredibly important. So, but yes, horse to water. But in this particular,
but it's an interesting one, because suddenly it's like, well, actually, why has that happened? And is it because it's not quite visible enough? Is the signage, the fact their signage is directly above the lift door, is that recessed signage? Should it actually be up on the lintel in advance? There are little things like that they think
should
of.
Should it be written? So again, go to a station you're familiar with, where they've written lift on there. Lift. You can put it's.
It's trying to make sure the maximum number of people. Yeah.
But signage is not also that, as I say, you would have assumed these people would have been actually actively looking for a lift, as opposed to somebody who's just in a rush. But I think what their focus was on, I know what it was. I'd actually come off the cross-country train and I'd come up the steps, so I passed them. That's right. So actually they were rushing to catch their train. So yeah.
Oh yeah, it might be that they made the decision to just not use the lift in that instance. But it is it's an interesting example of the fact that we have to, we have to do our best to accommodate all the behaviours that we see. So next, this is a more complicated picture to explain. I suspect the thing that you're going to talk about, though, is the fact that there is a door. Below that door are a few foot loops. I'm not quite sure what the official, steps, whatever you might call them. But also there is a large yaw damper. So tell us about, this is actually one of the early Azumas, because it's got the Virgin branding on the front. This is like the test.
So this is one of the things I'm very proud of, that again, working with ASLEF, was and actually this has come to bear out as how important this is. So we designed into the train, we said, right, when you get in and out, particularly in a course, for whatever reason, on a depot, got to examine the train, this has got an onboard hot axle box detector, so the driver will be told, get out, go back and examine. It's not only important in the dark to be able to find the footsteps, but actually the most important thing is actually lighting the ballast. Because just like I'm sure in your own home, you can probably go up and down, if you've got stairs in your own home, you'll be able to go up and down those stairs in the dark because of everything, because you just know. So actually the footsteps, you generally do that. But the ballast area, that's really important. And then, so some people may know that sadly a driver was killed in 2022 at a place called West Worthing in the south. There's a rape investigation. You can read it. Because the driver was by themselves. They got struck by a train coming on an adjacent line. It was in the dark, so nobody knows for certain. But the rape things is that the likelihood is that the driver stumbled, and one of the things they found was an old DC kickboard right next to it. It was a very old train of 313. Now, interesting, out of that, it's now in a very recent publication of standards, it's now mandatory to fit forward-facing CCTV. That actually came out of a DFT directive. We all have our views about the DFT, because people are saying, as a result of no video evidence. And what I was saying is actually, we should mandate the fitting of cab and retrofitting, because that actually would have potentially saved that driver in the incident, because it would have certainly illuminated the ground, the poor conditions. And the RAID report talks about that kickboard being there for a very, very long time, because it keeps on being picked up on the whatever was the equivalent of you see it over a number of years. It's still lying there.
Various cab
so what happens there? You open the door. It's a bit like a fridge. The light comes on. So a really important feature.
So to add to the description, what we're looking at is we're zoomed in on the door, on the cab door, and there is a light shining down, a bit like a kitchen downlighter, shining onto the steps. But as you say, crucially, very nicely illuminating the ballast clearly, so that you know where you're putting your feet as you come out of the train. Really.
So yes, we want to focus on ride comfort, WYSI PIS screens. more efficient engines, better traction package, but something as simple as that would save somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about trains, this thing, which by the way has very much got a face. This is a photo taken to demonstrate that the Aurora has a face. This is a new fleet of trains coming along. It certainly has a legacy to the previous fleets that some of the previous recent fleets that you've introduced, but it is very much a new train. A lot has changed, not least when you sent me pictures of the inside of this thing compared to the inside of the skeleton, if you like, the exoskeleton of the previous Hitachi generation of these trains, to this one. It's a very different cab protective structure design, which is very interesting. So anyway, that's another story for another time. But tell us about the Aurora. We have a picture of the Aurora. This aubergine and bronze thing
is about cooperation. And the theme here, so signal sighting is really important.
Yeah.
So we have a virtual central driving position. We're only 100 mil off the center line, so really, really good sight lines. We have a slightly sharper, rakier nose than its older brother, and that's driven by that we're a 24-meter vehicle versus a 26. So the original cab design, we have people like this, and whether it's Iron Man, some other trains, better LED lights, but we also have a mouth. Our nose cone opens like a mouth versus the sort of clamshell. But here, this was so, and again, you can do with clever stuff with CAD and all that carry on. But to build confidence, this is actually proper. So the colleagues from Network Rail have the lollipop with the white circle with the black that represents. So you do.
There's quadrants, isn't it? It's a number of quadrants of where it might be.
Two to the left, two to the right.
Yeah.
Two which are ground position lights, so low down. Certain offsets are set so many distance to the left, a bit more to the left. A light on a stick for a normal signal, and I think we have 2 or 3 positions of that, left-hand side, right-hand side, and then that big one up in the air is representing a gantry signal. That colleague with the white hat on, that's one of our drivers, because I wanted a 50th percentile. So that gentleman, he's been a driver for a very long time, and he said it was one of his proudest moments, and I'm very proud of that individual to do that. And that makes a difference, because when somebody sits in the seat, so, nobody asked me and this thing,
Yes.
I get that picture out and go, do you know who that is? And
Yeah.
like, that's such,
Absolutely.
that's a really nice guy. He's from such and such depot. And I went, yeah.
Absolutely.
Go and have a word with him about what we did for signal sighting.
Well,
because if you're doing 125 miles an hour,
Yeah.
it's rather important that you can see the lights on stick still.
And it comes back to this point you talked about customers and colleagues. You're building a train for, there are hundreds of staff that will work on these trains. Hundreds of colleagues working on these trains in total. Of all the different staff working on them, they all have to live with these things, and they should have not just an easy time of using the trains, but also an enjoyable time. They want a pleasant working environment. We all want a pleasant working environment, don't we? So,
I always say that people say about, how much does that seat cost? Because I say that's the most important seat. That is the best seat in the house, and so it should be. And I always, somebody goes, why don't you do that? And what I'm sitting and I went, okay, put this into context. Do you fly? Do you go on holiday? Yes, I fly. And you go, would you be the boys and girls up front who are flying this thing? I'm pretty certain that you would want them to have the best seat, so they were at the best of their ability when they're flying, and have to go back to that reacting at a moment's notice. I think if you said, they're sitting on a wooden seat at the front, I think you would have an issue with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. An interesting question's come through on that. What allowances, if any, do you make for left-handed and right-handed drivers? Because obviously you can't move all the kit around. But what? Yeah, go on.
That's a really good one. So in terms of anthropomorphics, God, I said that well. I clearly need more from the green.
Yeah,
room.
drink more. Too well spoken.
I won't be able to say that. So and again, going back to reps. So you design it for what they call 5th percentile to 95th percentile. And you also have it for a particular group in the world. So we use a UK database. So if you anybody's been to the Netherlands, their 95th is taller than our 95th. Similarly, if you go to Japan or to the Far East, their fifth is a lot lower than our fifth. So though it's a global supply chain, you do have to specify for your bit. And we do have ethnicity in there as well. It does take the UK mix and the kaleidoscope of lovely people we have in the UK. But in terms of left and right hand, generally no. But one, again, interesting feature. So the original 395, so the Javelin, or so Hitachi's product, which is now probably in terms of design is over 15 years old and having a lovely new refresh, great train. You go in the cab of that, and that's what it was based on. The combined power controller is on the left-hand side, which is fairly traditional. But the I'm trying to remember, but the TMS screen, which the driver is on the left-hand side. This is so, and then the CCTV screens are on the right. I think that's because we're the opposite way round.
Yeah.
The driver then has some form of major alarm, comes up on the screen, and normally you then interact by tapping. If you've got some major alarm where you're stopping the train, using this left hand to put the brakes on, the right hand is this hand is over here, but I've got to cross over.
Yeah, okay, so it's ergonomics again.
Because that cab was designed by engineers, so the operator got to it too late. So we swapped those around. So therefore, actually, you've got this hand and your CCTV and your CCTV. You're generally going to use that when you're stationary. So actually, it didn't matter, but it keeps the free hand. So it's very important to think about primary actions and secondary actions. So there's another example of just think about how does the user behave. I don't drive. I go back to shouldn't have me drive, but actually, because they said, hang on, these are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So we checked over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the previous was in the factory. Here we can see these trains out whizzing about on some railway. So tell us what's going on with the Aurora here.
So again, one of the things about new trains introduction, so we talked about technical compatibility, which is generally infrastructure isn't necessarily brand new, isn't up to the latest standards. Your train has to be. So that's how to work the new train with the old infrastructure and old trains as well. Then you have what we call operational compatibility. So bring my train to a station, can I see the signal? Is the stepping distance okay? If I've got selected door opening, all those elements. And then the other bit you have to do, and it's the law, is a thing called safe integration. So you're bringing a change, you have to consider the system. So one of the factors is about visibility and audibility. So very important for trackside workers, for foot crossings, level crossings, the warning horn, the lights and all that carry on. Modern train, it's lit up like Wembley Stadium at the front end. So, but one of the concerns that people have had, the infamous non-yellow front end, but also that to reduce annoyance to line side neighbours, horn audibility standards have changed and come down a bit. And then the other thing is on the IEP, Hitachi interpret the standards because there are different standards. The horn has to be louder if you run a train above 100 miles an hour than below, because naturally you're going to be approaching, if you want 10 seconds warning time, well, the faster a train comes, that's further away, therefore the horn has to be set. So they interpreted the standard that actually they would have a valve that changed level at 100, which has caused a number of things, but whereas CAF interpreting just went, we'll have it at 125. So we have that on that train. But as this had been a sensitive issue, appropriate, rather than just going, well, it complies with the approval standard, we did an audibility exercise. So that's on the test track in Nottinghamshire, Riddick or Old Dalby, depending on how old you are. Yeah. And we brought colleagues from Network Rail in the important that. So the lady who's in the left-hand picture, she's responsible for level crossing safety in the East Midlands. So, and a foot crossing. So we mimicked. We found a perfect example, a real one in the Nottingham area, where you come around the corner, the warning horn, and you come around the corner and you're on the level crossing. So there's a whistle board, absolutely, that is the control for it.
Yeah.
So we wanted to assure that person who's responsible for that crossing. So we set up, we had the train run in both directions. We had some road traffic. We had wind coming across us. We set it up to mimic as much as possible. And what was great about that, we had them sound the horn, the driver sound the horn before the minimum, I think it was 12 seconds if it's a high risk, I think they call it a high risk crossing. And you could hear it as plain as day before it hit their thing. So actually in that very first run, that great colleague there went, fine.
Happy, yeah, exactly.
So as well as here's the science, because the science is it's static, it's a sound meter 25 meters away, whatever, and people will go, oh, that's not like real life. It's a bit like people talk about fuel consumption in a car or exhaust, here's your spec for your car and your exhaust, well, what your car actually does. So it's really important, a bit of hearts and minds to do that. And I have a report, I have that signed by Network Rail. So further down the line, somebody else has an issue, there you go. Exactly, and we've got another a number. This is one example from Safe Integration.
Yeah, I was going to say there's dozens of dozens is probably an underestimation. There are countless processes like this that you go through requiring various levels of stepped up or stepped down levels of physical testing, as well as the theory and the kind of the engineering technical documentation proving a particular point. Lots of fun stuff to do. Now, I've taken up an additional 16 minutes of your time, Robin, so thank you very much for that.
Right.
I've
got nothing else to do in my life, Gareth. So.
It's not like you've got a new train fleet to facilitate the arrival of. No, this is a nice picture to end on, because it's So I'll describe what's happening, and you can tell us why you like this picture and why this picture is the end one. So it's a view. It's in the Great Hall, the National Rail Museum in York, and there are two mocked up front ends of a train. They've actually got rid of the mocked up front end of one of these now. It's somewhere else because they put the real one in instead. It's the front of a 373 next to the front of an 80X, so an IET, in the museum, and you've taken a selfie capturing both of them in the museum. So, Robin, why is this? As we talked about the 8.5 trains you've introduced, I really like the fact that you represent a large number of the trains that have been introduced on the East Coast Main Line in its entire history. That's quite a fun. That's quite a fun bit of history. But anyway, tell us about this picture and why you particularly like this one as a way to end.
So I said earlier that how long I'd been in rail, and I think it appears that I've been in so long that actually I'm in the Railway Museum now, because those are two of my projects. So it's a sort of sweet and sour. I'm extremely proud. But on the other hand, it makes me feel very old. So,
Robin, you're still a young man. You're still a young man. You've still got fleets ahead of you. Fleets ahead of you.
Easy paper round. So we didn't have electricity in the lake. So anyway, but 3308, which is the Eurostar they now have in that on my train. So that physically is one of mine. So,
that's
the high fidelity mock-up.
Yeah.
That we use with ASLEF. So just on that, here's a long career, couple of we call it career threatening moments, particularly with senior management. I'm sure you've never had that, Gareth, whatsoever, ever. So you've had that joy. So two little stories. One after Hatfield. So for people of a younger ilk, so Hatfield was a terrible accident where the train, London to Leeds, just coming out of London, not long out of London, went round a curve, the rail shattered underneath, train derailed, 4 passengers died. Awful. And as a result, it was, depending on what you call it, rolling contact fatigue or gauge corner cracking, that literally, and as a result, speed restrictions came across the network. So rather than say 2 hours to go from York to London, it was 5, I think, at one point, and they were coming on and coming off. And I was head of train planning and leading a great team of colleagues, and we wrote the timetable over a 6-month period. That was the entire timetable, rolling stock diagrams, crew diagrams, over 85 times to the level that you would do the annual timetable change. So we were starting to come out of gauge corner cracking and whatever, and as a result, the ability to run more services and whatever. And Christopher Garnett, who was the chief executive of GNR, great man, great leader. Where we're train planning was not far from his office, and actually we were on the way to the gents. So when he went to the gents, he passed where I was at, and he came up and he was like going, and what we also said, and it was one of those things where you, as a manager, where you've got to go, hang on, we need to stop firefighting, because actually we've got to bid for the next national timetable. So I need to take my team, my long-term train planning team, off to concentrate on that. So the number of times we change has to get further apart, because we don't have the bandwidth to do that. And Christopher came along and he was like going, oh, well, could you, I tell you what, I think I've got this idea, we'll do this with the diagram or whatever. And I just went, Christopher, all the timetable, all the diagramming is, what we would say today is on SharePoint, is internet, whatever. Yeah. Probably on a piece of paper, on a board or whatever. And I went, fill your boots. And it was one of those things that the way I said it, I was just like, give us a break.
Yeah.
Now, that was a very brave move to say to the chief executive who's trying to drive a company out of it. But I think it was how he treated people, but also how he held trust in his team. I don't think I'd make that. I don't think I'd do that. But the example of the cab mock-up. So again, another person I have a lot of respect. So Matthew Galton, most recently MD of Transpennine Express, currently with DOR. Matthew was my boss at Great Western, and we'd bought ASLEF, and we had a very tall, if I can find the photo, but we had a very tall driver, Steve, what would otherwise known as a lanky person, and Mel, who was we struggled to actually get a short enough driver. We couldn't actually get an intercity driver who was below 5th percentile. So Mel was 10th percentile, but basically where her shoulders were Steve's hips.
Okay.
I will find the photo during some Q&A. So we had a 3-step, because of that yaw damper that you saw earlier, there was no perfect step solution, so it's offset. So there was a 3-step solution and a 2-step solution. We put one on one side of the mock-up, one on the other, and basically we had our 2 lead reps. So Andy Hood, who's now the chair of ASLEF's cab subcommittee, author of ASLEF's best practice cab design. Recommend that.
Yeah, good document.
And Mark Wakenshaw, who's also on the national exec at the moment. They were the lead reps, LNER and GWR. And I basically said, right, you've got an hour. We're going to make a brew. We're going to come back now and pick. And you want to pick one. So they picked one. Anyway, 2 weeks later, we took our directors. So Mark Hopwood is the MD, commercial director, and Matthew. And Matthew, they're really great. So he takes an interest. And he noticed there were 2 and a 3. And he went, he says, oh, I noticed. He says, what's that about? I says, oh, these 2 options, 2 to pick. And he went, well, I prefer, I'd have to remember, but let's say, I'll go back to A and B, then I won't embarrass myself which one's there. So Matthew goes, well, I like B. And I think ASLEF would pick A. And I went, Matthew, to be fair, I don't, if you pardon the language, I don't give you what you think, because it's what ASLEF matters. And he went, fair enough.
Yes, it's important to have a relationship with senior management that enables frank conversations, frank opinions, and the empowerment of staff in the rest of the business. So I think all credit to your past managers for not having a long meeting without biscuits after that. So it's you
play that card rarely, but you can play it. So
yes, as I say, you've still got a few fleets to go, I suspect, Robin. So I'm looking forward to, at some point, lining them all up. You can have little brass rubbing sort of thing of all of them on a little plaque for you when you do retire in 30 or 40 years. But yeah, these having these 2 in the museum is something that's pretty cool. I mean, I always enjoy riding over bits of track that I've had a hand in, but it's not quite. I will admit that it isn't quite the same. It's not quite the same as having a train that you've had a major hand in getting out on track and carrying people around. So we have a couple of questions, if I may do this before. Firstly, thanks very much for that tour of the subject. There's a lot there to cover. Oh yeah, go on.
That's the photo.
Oh yes.
So Mel, you can see where Steve's sort of the sleeves of his jumper, that's where his waist is. And John, who's in the middle, he was the 50th percentile, Mr. Average. So.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, we joke, but this is the important stuff you've got to do to make sure that arrangement is safe for everyone that is going to be driving those trains. We do not want to be building trains to exclude people.
And again, a very quick one: passenger alarm. You go on a 80X, it's in a luggage rack. It's offset from the standard. If you've got to press the button, can a 5th percentile without clambering over the top of you touch it? So on our recent project, Julie, who is actually the L&D coordinator, we had a visit from the L&D team, came to look at it. I went, "You're perfect. If you pardon this expression, I want you, come and do this." And because we've been asking the supplier, is it reachable? Can you do this? We got some CAD drawings and everything. No, much better. Real person. Yes. Photo. Jobs are good.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Works. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I was going to say that. I know you enjoy the generally when we've sat in the pub and you've shown me pictures of your latest sort of challenge that you've had to overcome. You do enjoy practical testing, and I think there's not much that beats a practical test, whether it's with a mock-up or even in the kind of the early testing fleets where you're still you're still innovating and improvising to get over challenges. So I'm going to go back through some of the questions. So Rafael Nicolaus asks, what about train lengths, and how is train length specified from your perspective? Do you, I suppose, to kind of add to this one, do you just get the train length and that's that, or is it, because it's not just infrastructure defined, there are infrastructure limitations. What does the conversation look like?
There's at least a couple of practical factors in there, and again for site. So I'm currently work for East Midlands Railway. The big reveal. We haven't come back to that photo at the beginning. Still, if anybody spotted it, I'll come back to. So the clue is it's very close to the factory where that train came from. Very close.
Oh, okay.
It's about 10, 12 miles.
I knew that actually. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So there you go. There's a clue for people.
Yeah.
And that canopy doesn't exist, mind you. Fortunately, neither does that haircut. All that. So yeah, I was young. I needed the money. Anyway, so a couple of factors. So it's like the biggest one is the distance between. So we serve London St Pancras. Distance between the buffers and the signal at the end of the platform. I think the shortest one is something like 258 meters, something about it's round about the 263 meters. IUP is a 26 meter vehicle. We wanted the option to both run some big trains and little ones. We can't really take because it's not just at that location, but that actually was the driver for shrinking it to a 24 meter train. So that factor. That has led to, and this is one of the factors why there's so many changes, because you've locked up not just a meter, but if you imagine the cubic amount of space. So our fresh water tank for the toilet, which is downstairs and IP, is upstairs now because that's gone. So those are factors.
Yeah, the literal meterage that you've got to sellotape stuff under the train of all the different systems and MEP and HVAC and all this stuff and traction mechanics. All that has a certain distance to fit under the train. You've just got rid of quite a lot of meters cubed.
Then another thing, and again using East Midlands as an example, it's also not just about. So people say, "Oh, well, you can have STO to manage stations," or that's fine. But then you get to a station like Sheffield. So Sheffield, a multi-use, so Transpennine, Northern, cross country using that through services, terminating from the south. So there actually you also, and some of the platforms are through, some of them actually aren't. They're only signal from one direction. They may look through, so 8 isn't through, 6 isn't through. That's a factor to say, well, actually, if all my trains were big, I don't have enough platform capacity for turnarounds at those locations. So Nottingham's got some enormously long platforms, but 5 is short. So Sheffield has 7 as a bay. It operates 1 as A and B. So these are constraints that, and sometimes we also come in from the north. If we have to divert, and we have some planned services. So the nature of your individual infrastructure and constraints is also what drives it. But however, building on that, fundamentally, a train is a big steel tube. It's a big aluminium. It's a big metal tube. It's got a constraint of how wide it can be, how tall it can be because of the UK Victorian infrastructure. You can't have it infinitesimally long because it's got to go around some corners.
And the Midland Main Line, to answer a question that came up earlier, the Midland Main Line you have less space on the Midland Main Line than you do on the East Coast Main Line because of there are quite a few more curved platforms, particularly at the southern end, actually, of the Midland Main Line.
Yeah. So, however, then you pays your money, makes your choice. So if we take a classic between, I want space for bikes, I want space for big luggage, golf clubs, whatever. I want space for buggies, I want space for wheelchairs, I want space for toilets. But I want space for seats, but I want tables. Ultimately, you can have anything you want, but one is a compromise as another. So if you have a big floor space and go, great, I've got a buggy parking area, something it's obviously of direct interest to you, I've got to take some seats out.
Yeah.
Then they go, oh, well, we'll have some tip-up seats. All right, so when the buggy's not there, then people are in the tip-up seats and you turn up with the buggy. And it's no different if you look at some of the challenges that buses face.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
it's a point that actually I was on the road. This is an interesting one for you as a keen cyclist. I was on the Road CC podcast actually talking about. In fact, this is one. If you haven't listened to it, you should because I do call you out, Robin, actually on it. But I hopefully you'll understand it in jest. So I was being asked about why is there so crap storage for bikes? Why is there no space for this? I was like, well, look, right on the East Coast Main Line. Currently, it is full. We're running as many trains as we can on that line, and the uncomfortable truth is that we need as many seats as we can. And the decision, the decision that's been made at a political level and then down at an organisational level in the railways is we need to maximise the number of seats. And whether you dislike that you can understand why that decision has been made. The way to allow you to have the way to allow you to have family coaches, dining cars, lots of bike storage is to have a lot more capacity on the railway by building things like HS2. So, but
just on that.
Yeah.
So the thing here is somebody goes, oh, well, you can't carry as many. It's not very green, is it? But then I go, well, actually, that footprint to take, and again, lateral storage versus vertical storage. I've taken out 6, 7, 8 seats. Well, all those people are in a car. So my argument is, well, actually, I think as you know, I do this, but ultimately it's a political direction, a societal direction, and to say, but one of the features, so again, taking the IUP was the seat with no window.
Yeah.
And people are saying, oh, it's ridiculous. But actually, the nature of that train has different markets at different times of day, different. So a classic would be a train going into London calling from Newark and Grantham has got a commuter on that at 7:30, whatever. They want to sleep.
Yeah.
Because they're working. They want that extra hour in bed. So actually, I don't care what's out the window, whatever. That point in time, that train is now going to work the 10:30 to Aberdeen, and let's say it's festival time. Big demand for luggage galore, whatever. Yeah. Well, actually, one of the innovative solutions that we took from Eurostar was that you could have put a bag over that, designed that, and therefore it becomes a luggage storage. It then gets to does that, and then another point in time, and even the same customer. So I give the example of somebody, a female, who is commuting in the week. So and let's say they're commuting or they're business traveling, they want laptop, they don't want to stare out the window, whatever. At the weekend, they're going to a hen party, they're going away for their weekend, the same train, they want a bay table, they want to fill it full of Prosecco, and they want with their mates. So there's even the same customer, the same individual wants different demands, and that's the challenge, particularly with an intercity service.
And with the train deployment, the train development is always compromised on that front, and the way to create the way to allow more flexibility is to not run a railway that completely sweats the asset. That a little bit of additional capacity allows you that choice, but to achieve that, that's a political decision to spend big bucks on upgrading capacity, and that's the right thing to do, but it's a decision that happens above the people who design the trains. And
also one of the factors is that the more you vary a product, you're paying. We don't buy thousands of trains.
Yeah.
If you think about aircraft, So Boeing and Airbus, yes, there are variants, but ultimately, you want to. It's in the manufacturer's interest to have the same core product, and it's in the interest of the client, because the more you ask for change, the development cost, you're disproportionate, because your
costs,
project,
but also complexity as well, right?
And you can't jam spread that over a lot of things. And that's also important in managing relationships with the trade unions, because you go along and you get, so going back to that example of a village, if your rep is incredibly tall, for their perspective, they'll go, I want this seat as far, you might go, hang on, we've agreed that with the trade union. No, you have to agree with us. So change adds time and cost. And ultimately, so that's a really important thing. Trying as much as possible to have a call, because the other thing is trades last for a long time in the UK. We asked for them to do, and when you sign a piece of paper, and if your train is a bit delayed, the market changes. So sometimes the actual design, it's really important to design flexibility. So one of the features, for instance, in IEP, is that there is a window blind at every seat, but it's first or standard, and part of that was the flexibility to be able to, if the market changes and the bigger demand for first, or if we want to change it, we want to squeeze everything up, you didn't have to strip the train.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's something that involves pulling all paneling off to rebuild and stuff.
Power sockets.
Yes.
I can't find it under the seat, whatever. Well, a factor in that is that if you build them into the side,
you've locked in where the seats are.
That's a big wiring job. Just think about your own home. If you wanted to move the socket, I've got to chisel it into the wall.
I remember when we got our house, it was a new build, and we were given an A4 sheet of paper. This will be familiar to you with trains. I was given an A4 sheet of paper that had all the symbols for where the lights and sockets would be. And they said, "Is that all right? Do you think that's all right?" And I looked at this thing and I thought, I have absolutely no idea. And this is useless to me, and I know it's going to be wrong and annoying when I actually put all my furniture in the right place. And sure enough, all the sockets are in the wrong place.
Again, a really good example with sockets and about technology, how rapidly this thing goes out, and because we can have anything we want as long as we've got the cash, as it were. Every time there's a new iPhone or a Samsung or whatever, I'll get it. If you then so when we started on this project, on projects, I've had just a 3-pin, then I want a USB. Then it's like do I have one particularly for standard? So we had 2 3-pins and one USB. Well, what happens to do that? And then you go, well, actually, I've now got USB-C.
USB-C,
I want to do this.
And then do we want induction charging in the table?
I'll move away from induction because they're just rubbish. I can't
imagine the EMC is very...
Just like... into a pack of cable much better. However, but the flip side is, as long as you've put the thing, it's just like I changed the sockets in my house recently and put USBs in. That was just take one off and put one on. Sort of. That bit is technically is relatively simple. However, the more you have, what's your unit price? I've got to change a drawing. What do I do during transition? What spares do I hold in the maintenance thing? So it's not just even sticker technology, labels. Does it meet the fire standard? Where's the design drawing? Where's the engineering team? What do we do with the spares? So even what appears to be a minor change. Another little example, train bows. So we've done a lot in terms of inclusivity in the railway and put the rainbow symbol on trains. We have a feature on the front of our train to manage pressure pulse when you go through tunnels. It's begins with a P. It's
pitot tube.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Nerd.
It's just above the cab door. I showed a load of pictures. So basically, where somebody will naturally stick promotional vinyl. So you need to go through an engineering change, because if you put that over the top of it,
you've broken that system. So just some little feature, these little tiny changes, and that's not just about building, about how you're going to manage that train and the engineering change process going forward. So I'm conscious of time. I'm going to ask 2 quick fire ones, and because we really have, it's gone on long, Rob, and I'm so sorry I have nabbed your time and it's bedtime for both of us. Quick ones from one down. Carbon footprint. Do you think about carbon footprint in trains over its lifespan and ways to manage that? How do you manage carbon footprint?
Yes. Yeah. So like anything, sort of cradle to grave. So how you manufacture, the process of manufacturing parts. Yes, it's a very important part that manufacturers do. So the latest train, we got yes, we have a diesel engine on it, but it's designed we specified it to be to the latest emission standards for that and what's on the market at that point in time. So yes. But I will say the most important thing is trying to get people to travel by rail. So it's looking at holistically. So there are certain elements. So people go, well, why don't we have a pure electric? Well, if I did, I'd be running the grumbly diesels for a lot longer. So actually, there's a lot of compromise and optimization in and
it's building a train to last as well. So all the components, the longer those components last, the less maintenance, the less carbon, all that good stuff. Next quickfire one. There's a few people who are going, this sounds awesome. How do where do I go to work and do this? You've worked client side pretty much entirely.
Yes.
You'd say work client side and had. I don't want to talk out of turn, Robin. I think you've probably had quite a lot of fun in your career. Do you recommend going client side, or do you think it's also, think there's a lot of fun to be had going and working for manufacturers as well?
Oh, absolutely. And one of my things I've sort of tried to picture a few. There was a job actually advertised with Alstom recently, and I went, that sounds interesting, because they were looking for an operations specialist. So I'd far rather because if you're a supplier, what you want to do is to what do we call it? Excite and delight, your customer. Well, actually, if you know what your customer wants before the customer tells you, you're going to get a lot more business. That's my point of view, from that point of view. So actually, great colleagues who understand what you're after, go back to that. So you're brilliant engineers, brilliant procurers, but the big thing, it's a system, and how do you you can't read the mind of your customer, but actually, both on the manufacturing side and every bit of the system is really, really important in do that. And going back to that thing, so my phrase is I'm a deliverer of legacy. So all those trains you've seen there, they're going to be running, hopefully, a lot longer than since I've retired. Let's stick with that one on a happy note. But I'm really proud. So gone with compatibility, use that as an example. Compatibility, a gauging engineer, they should be your best friend in a new trains project. They are the people who have to sign on a compromise for infrastructure, and basically say they sign, and part of that is on what I'm going to call a go to jail card. So bring them on. So that we've had some fantastic support. So shout out Heather.
Hi,
and she's amazing. And Steve, Mr. Valentine,
of course, good old Steve Valentine.
And then there's the other one. Sorry, I always forget your name. But we did that, and what we did, we've taken them to the factory and we showed them the train. It's got no direct relevance to them whatsoever. And one of the pilots, Heather, stood in front of the train on the production floor, and she went, can I have my picture, because I want it on my LinkedIn page, because she's scared I've been part of this project. Go back to, it's people make the magic happen.
Those of you in the gauging team, all the people in the gauging team, shout out. I know a few of you listened to this, so hello, lovely gauging team people involved. Yes, absolutely. We're both train and track people. Both Robin and I are big fans of yours, because you get to say no to us.
And then the other thing is also cake. That's so you might have seen in one of the pictures. So the picture of TPE, that was the cake I baked on the train on the very first one. Chocolate mug cake, dead easy recipe, 3 minutes. It's great. Wow your kids, wow any of your friends, but bake is the solution. So we had it could have been a difficult meeting yesterday with our supplier around training. Went really, really well. One of my specialisms, cream egg fudge recipes on the internet. Really reckon one for Easter. So yeah,
you are. Yeah, it's worth for people who don't know. Robin is renowned for baking skills. Robin, I'm going to give you even about you drink that, and I shall do some outros before we say a proper goodbye. So everyone,
go on. Do you want anything more?
Good. No, we'll wrap up, and I can ping you questions. So
I am proud to talk, so over to you.
It's because it's a fascinating subject. Everyone, thank you so much for listening in audio-only form. As ever, podcast available on all good podcasting platforms. the usual plugs, patreon.com/Gareth Dennis to ensure more of this happens. Thanks to all of you for your patience for my little break, and actually all of the Patreon supporters, shout out to all of you for being lovely and supportive about my little break. I needed it, and it was very well. Actually, it wasn't very welcome because I was stressed and doing lots of writing, but it was necessary. GarethDennis.co.uk/merchandise to buy the APT hat that I modelled earlier. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and verbal abuse, and GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the chat that is continuing on and on. Everyone in here is saying that they very much enjoyed you as a guest, and there's a risk that the conversation could have gone on until the early hours. Yes, that is true.
Just invite me back, Gareth.
The next thing is this strange picture. I have handed in a draft to a publisher of a thing that I'm not going to announce yet, but most of you probably know about it already, so stay tuned for that. And next week, it's a news episode, folks. Episode 209, Sheffield reclaims its trams, and some other bits of news. So it's a general catch-up on what on earth has been going on in while I've been away. So as we return to Robin, oh, go on.
Well, we the very beginning, we haven't answered the quiz question because nobody appears to have got it.
Unless someone did say Darlow. There was a Darlow that appeared further up. Someone said Darlow, and
no, so it was, I think, probably roughly as the crow flies, 10:15 from the British Leyland National Factory at Lilleshall, near Workington. That is Whitehaven, Bransby.
Whitehaven.
In, I think, do the maths, 1981. So during the war, probably the first Gulf. Anyway, so yeah, that's country. So
no one was right.
And it was the Whitehaven News. Came out on Thursday. Don't know if it still does. Or the Carlisle Evening Star. So yeah.
Okay. Oh well, Robin, it has just been an absolute. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. As I say, a long time coming. It's a pleasure to have had you on. Fascinating talk. We could have done it for hours and hours more, but let's have our evenings back. Given we've been speaking for an hour and 46 minutes.
So you got to plug. You got to plug something.
Do some plugging.
So my turn to plug. Some friends of mine, Tony Miles, a steam rail journalist, and Anna Jane Hunter, excellent consultant, reasonable rates available from Wynne Phillips. But they did started a podcast called Parallel Lines, and I was their guinea pig on their first pilot episode. Oh, yes. They have done one subsequently. So again, it's available. It's definitely available on Spotify.
I'll pop a link in the description.
If you want to learn more about new trains and that toilet story, so how do you work out how big your toilet waste tank is? That's on Parallel Lines episode 1. All good suppliers available. So there's my plug.
It's a good plug. All railway podcasts seem to be exploding out the woodwork at the moment. We set a trend with Rail Natter back in the day. Anyway, Robin, thank you so much. Everyone in the chat, thank you so much. It only remains for Robin and I to wave vigorously and say cheerio. Everyone, see you next week. Cheerio.
Bye. Bye.